We are together again to talk about what we did last week, the Democrats' Catturd Deficiency. Today, we can talk about a recent data point talking about how important this is, and secondly, an opportunity created by Trump's illegal attack on Iran. The first case is research that Kate Starbird, she's at University of Washington. She's one of the few people whose disinformation funding has not been cut. And what she did was track conspiracy theories about the assassinations in Minnesota and how quickly after the assassination, I mean, you can see there's a timeline on the bottom and the big spike in conspiracy theories, how quickly after the assassination, the right wing moved to define the assassination and tried to find an explanation other than white Christian Trump supporter decided to get guns and start killing Democrats, right? And I think that this is really stunning research. This is, some of the little research that's still being funded, but I think it shows that why we cannot leave the Nazi bar entirely, because this is what's happening in our absence. The entire masses of people are coming to understand really central events, and they're coming to understand them based on what white supremacists tell them to believe it is.
We took an online poll. 90% of our audience and 400,000 people voted were against the United States getting involved in a war in Iran.
That's background to where we are today, which is 3, 4, or 5 days after Trump struck Iran. And this is a really remarkable moment because, well, there are other issues on which Trump's base has policy fights, especially over the reconciliation bill that's working its way through the Senate. Mostly those are handfuls of people. How do people want to cut Medicaid? How do New Yorkers want to protect their constituents from taxes? They're a fairly narrow set of issues, but here you have important parts of Trump's base who came out in advance of the strike on Iran against it, and who you're still seeing some disgruntlement about it going forward. And I would describe those parts of his base. One is there's a group of people who are really Russian useful idiots. And they probably are doing this at least partly in a pro-Russian mindset. And the most prominent of those is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who even after the strike said she still opposes them. And she attacked AOC for coming out against the strike and said, well, you're in favor of war because you funded the Ukrainian war against Russia. Like, that's a big tip. There's an associated group of people, overlapping group of people who are basically Nazis or some other kind of proud anti-Semite, and they are very disturbed that Donald Trump is getting in bed and doing the bidding of Bibi Netanyahu.
Well, it was very obvious that this war was going to happen because the American foreign policy is dictated by Israel.
Candace Owens, yes. So she's one of the most outspoken people speaking from this anti-Semitic standpoint.
First and foremost, I can think of nothing more anti-Semitic than 2 years of bombing the Palestinians, who are a Semitic people. That's another thing. They just decided they're the only Semitic people, which is absolutely absurd and it's erroneous.
But there's a ton. Sadly, that makes up a huge number of Trump's base. There's a third group, a very small group, but people who are legitimately libertarians.
We have the ability to do it. We can drop bunker busters on the facilities there. But then we're talking about the humiliation level will rise greater.
One testament to the rupture in Donald Trump's base comes from some of his Jan 6 supporters, some of his more potentially violent supporters. And in this case, this is a tweet from Joe Biggs.
4 days after the news networks called the election for Joe Biden, Joe Biggs, the gang's top propagandist, I would say, published a blog titled "The Second Civil War is Closer Than You Might Think. Buy ammo, clean your guns, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better.
Joe Biggs, remember, was instrumental in Pizzagate in 2016. So he comes right out of this trolling culture and was part of it. He was instrumental in pushing the Seth Rich conspiracy in 2017. He has ties to InfoWars. And he, after going through some treatment for PTSD, he was a staff sergeant in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And more than Pete Hegseth, more than J.D. Vance, he has absolutely the right to say that the 20 years of U.S. war were a problem. I mean, he definitely came back a damaged man. He joins in with the Proud Boys, and even within the Proud Boys is a controversial figure because he's always pushing the edge. He's always pushing to confront more than some others and pushing some really hostile language. He was out even after the right kind of fell in line behind Donald Trump, mocking this notion that you can control what's going to happen. It's just a targeted airstrike, he claims. It's just one time. It isn't war, we promise. You said no new wars, no intervention. That's Joe Biggs. That's somebody who still has at least some credibility among the militia right. He has, unlike Charlie Kirk, he has good reason to be angry at Donald Trump. He is one of the small handful of people who was not pardoned on Trump's first day in office. He was instead, his sentence was commuted, which means he's still an adjudicated terrorist, an adjudicated seditionist.
It was in between the ellipse and the Capitol where Joe Biggs came upon a police barricade. He breached that barricade, allowing the other rioters to go through and giving this sort of tacit endorsement to storming the Capitol. It was a pivotal moment for this entire riot.
Many of them are not getting their life back on track, but Joe Biggs especially is having a harder time doing that. But this is an important rupture. None of these people are nice people, right? But this is an important rupture because Trump is sort of stuck with these people. Trump is stuck with his Nazis. Trump is stuck with his militia people because they can threaten him as much. I'm not saying Joe Biggs is threatening Donald Trump, but they can threaten him as much as they threaten, say, Minnesota Democrats, right?
Very unique position that he's in, where they're afraid of him, but yet he wants peace.
Finally, there's people who sold Trump as the anti-war candidate, and Charlie Kirk is a really fundamentally important one of those because as recently as last week, he was saying, "Let's not do this war."
Who are you to jam us into this situation which you knew you couldn't finish the job? Or if you can't, go finish it. You got plenty of things. Say, hey, Bannon, don't waste time. When you finish, then go finish it. Quit coming to us to finish it.
All of the TikToks of the buildup to the attack say that both he and Steve Bannon were invited to the White House to make their case. Obviously, Tucker Carlson is another one of these people. I would put him in the Russian useful idiot camp. But Charlie Kirk is super important because he was instrumental in getting out the vote for Trump. He had about it. He had half of that business split with Elon Musk. He is instrumental in Trump's outreach to young men. He is instrumental in Trump's credibility with the Christian nationalist world. And he was very outspoken against the attack and then has immediately fallen in line.
Only President Trump, with prudence and practicality and wisdom, is able to weigh them both, thread the needle, and walk the tightrope.
And has immediately shifted his messaging from commenting on the attack at all.
It's the man in the arena that counts. It's easy to lob criticisms.
To instead saying, let's hunt people inside the United States. Let's double down on Stephen Miller's Dragnet. Let's all, we'll guard the homeland at front against
so-called Iranian sleeper cells.
I raise all of this, especially with my focus on Charlie Kirk, is because Kirk especially was adjacent to, if not part of, the chat room that we talked about last week. He was, which as I described, was professionalized by a literal Nazi and was very successful in the 2016 election at, among other things, setting the media narrative for the day and hijacking Hillary's campaign messaging and kind of flipping it on its head. And I raise that because one of their most successful campaigns, not the one that was prosecuted, but a very successful campaign that just used the way Twitter works, focused on a draft our daughters hashtag. This is an example of one thing they did on Xitter in 2016, and there was a whole campaign around these. And what they did is they took some warm picture of a female, in this case, a young girl, hugging her military service dad. They branded it with Hillary's own campaign logos, which you can see there in the bottom right. And they used some line to emphasize Hillary's alleged warmongering. Soon I'll be old enough to finish what she started. And all of those hashtags, draft our daughters. And again, it was a whole campaign. They were very playful. They, I think, were incredibly effective at really playing up Hillary as warmonger. This is the exact counterpart to the campaign in last year's election. And you can see a real continuity even from 2016, but an exact counterpart to this effort to sell Donald Trump as the peace candidate.
If I win, we will have peace in the world again. I guarantee we will have peace in the world again.
There's an exact continuity to it. And so I argue that this is the kind of thing that Dems, whether it's on Xitter, I mean, Bluesky doesn't really help because it doesn't change the media narrative and it doesn't create disruptions in right-wingers' own messaging. But you could do this, and let's go to the next one. You could do this. Charlie Kirk, I've been focused on Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, again, was against the war, and now he's for it. And Charlie Kirk is 31. Why the hell can't we call on Charlie Kirk to sign up?
It's the man in the arena that counts.
Charlie Kirk says he trusts Donald Trump. He wants everyone else to trust Donald Trump. Well, if he says he trusts Donald Trump, he should go enlist. And then somebody with a spoof account still at Xitter, 4 Seasons Total Landscaping, is doing precisely that and saying, why don't we demand that Barron sign up? Why do we not demand that Barron enlist now that Trump is warmongering? And this one you could do in New York. This one you could do right at NYU because we know where he lives. He lives in a blue city, and at least an account that purports to be him has been just as gung-ho as Charlie Kirk is. And, normally for a long time, I think people rightly left Barron out of their messaging. Barron's now making millions from his daddy.
It's possible that Barron Trump has earned nearly $40 million, leaving him with an estimated $25 million fortune after accounting for taxes. That appears to be much more money than his older siblings piled up at his age.
In this particular case, I think it's fair game because Don Jr. was part of these threads back in 2016. Don Jr. is a central part of this kind of trolling, and there's no reason why his adult brother should be accepted from it. But it's just an example of this opportunity where there is a real split in Donald Trump's support, and we can either sit on Bluesky and do nothing, or we can find some venue, whether it's Xitter or TikTok or NYU, to call out the hypocrisy of these people and to demand that these alleged that the people who sold Donald Trump as a peace candidate, that they prove they trust Donald Trump by going to sign up, by being the white men who fight Donald Trump's war rather than the children of immigrants, right? You're not doing pleasant things when you're trying to rile up these ruptures on the far right. But nevertheless, this is Donald Trump's base. Nevertheless, Donald Trump can't have any visibility of these kinds of ruptures because once they start, they have the possibility of snowballing. And so, I think that this is a moment where Democrats really need to find a way to call out these ruptures, to make those ruptures uncomfortable, to make it very difficult for the Charlie Kirks of the world to flip-flop, to come back in line and to try and get everyone else to come back in line.